The story opens late at night, with Navin still awake, waiting for a chance to speak to his wife. When the call finally connects, his wife Madia, a journalist, asks him if he remembers what she once told him. She explains that the street child tied to that memory has now been missing for an entire week. Navin, worried more than curious, pleads with her to leave it alone and come back home, but Madia is already deep into her investigation. She slips inside a building after hearing what sounds like a child crying somewhere within. The moment she steps further in, she freezes. Armed guards spot her almost instantly. One of them yells that they have found her, and within seconds the entire place erupts into chaos. Madia runs, but before she can get away, an arrow slices through the air and hits its target. Pak Lung, the polished and cold handler for the ring, stands over the dead boy with a tired sigh. Instead of showing even a trace of guilt, he places the blame on Madia, telling her the child is dead because of her interference. Without wasting another second, Pak Lung orders his men to take Madia downstairs and interrogate her. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, another part of the story begins with a hardworking father building a house with his own hands. As he hammers away, he notices his daughter leaving early and asks where she is going at this hour. She tells him she has work, but gently says he should rest a little longer. Then, almost like she already knows the answer, she asks if she can come with him to his job instead. Through her narration, we learn that her father is always working, always pushing himself, and because of that, he cannot be with her as much as she wants. Still, he notices everything. He scolds her for not wearing the steel-toe boots he bought for her, worried she might get hurt. She laughs it off and asks him to make a finger heart for her camera. Her return to China is only 2 days away, so every moment with him matters now. Before leaving, she reminds him to be careful because of his old head injury. They say goodbye to customer briefly before going their separate ways. Not long after, at a nearby stall, a debt collector corners an elderly woman and demands his money. The woman tries to count the cash properly, but he snaps at her, telling her to stop counting and just give it to him. Watching from close by, the father mutters in Mandarin, disgusted that someone would bully an old lady like that. Later at home, his daughter tries to change his mind. She begs him to let her stay in the Philippines and help him instead of returning to China, but he has already arranged something important. He found a buyer from Eastport, and not just any buyer, a wealthy one. Somewhere else, Navin says that moving 3 children would be easy for him, but in exchange, he wants something. He asks for a direct meeting with the man's boss. Back at the father's home, a news broadcast reports the disappearance of journalist Madia Pham. In older footage, Madia is seen arguing that these kidnappings are not random cases. She insists the missing children all come from the same impoverished neighborhoods. According to her, this is not coincidence. It looks like an organized operation aimed at the city's poorest and most vulnerable kids. The police refuse to give any statement, while nearby, Rainey continues training. In the Philippines, her father keeps pushing her through her practice. Later, a woman tells Rainey she should cut her hair short, saying it would be more practical. Rainey refuses immediately, saying she would look awful. She adds that her classmates already tease her and call her a tomboy, so she does not need anything making it worse. Her father does not soften the lesson. He tells her he would rather see her alive than pretty. Then he admits the truth behind all the training. He cannot always be there to protect her. Rainey's frustration finally breaks through. She tells him she only trains because it gives her time with him. She never truly cared about Kung Fu. What she really wants is for him to return to China with her. Her pain spills out as she reminds him that her mother is already gone, and now it feels like he is abandoning her too. Crying harder, she screams that he never loved her. A stranger nearby coldly tells her that yelling will not make her father run after her. Moments later, another man approaches Rainey and asks if she understands Chinese. He claims his sister has been hit by a car and desperately needs help. Worried, Rainey follows him down the street, not realizing she is being led away. As they move deeper into the area, the man tells her to slow down and casually asks about her leg. Then, without warning, he grabs her. Rainey screams. Speaking in Filipino, one of the traffickers complains that grabbing only one kid is hardly worth the trouble. Still, they force Rainey into a waiting truck. Her father sees what is happening and charges after the vehicle on foot. Cars honk wildly as he cuts through traffic, refusing to slow down. Inside the truck, one of the traffickers orders the others to pull him away from the road. He fights with everything he has, but there are too many of them. They beat him back and overpower him. The truck pulls away with Rainey still trapped inside. Her father forces himself up as men shout at him to stop, but his attention is only on his daughter. Rainey, trained to defend herself but now completely terrified, screams for him from inside the truck. When she tries to struggle free, a trafficker orders someone to grab her before she can escape. The tires scream against the road as the truck speeds away, with Rainey still crying out for her father. He collapses in the middle of the street, gasping for air and unable to chase any farther. Sirens echo in the distance as he stumbles into a nearby shop, bleeding heavily. The shopkeeper looks at him with alarm and complains that he is getting blood all over the counter. Instead of helping much, the man points him toward a hospital down the street. Desperate, the father writes down what he can remember, especially the description of the large bald man involved in the attack. At the station, someone tells him to sit down and wait if he wants to report a crime. An officer snaps at him, warning him not to cause trouble again. Another person mentions that this is a kidnapping case, but still says he was instructed to simply wait. The father has a license plate number. He has a physical description of one of the attackers, but none of that seems to matter. The captain looks over the information and decides it does not seem like a proper report. Instead of sending anyone after the kidnappers, he keeps the paperwork for himself. Just like that, the case is buried before it even begins. When they look into the father, nothing useful comes back. No driver's license, no work records, no criminal file. There is no trace of a normal life attached to him. It is almost as though he appeared from nowhere. Someone assumes he is probably running from something. Elsewhere, Rainey sits alone and frightened, calling out for her dad. At the same time, a police officer leans close to the father and demands to know who he really is. Meanwhile, deep inside an underground fight club, the crowd roars as two fighters trade brutal blows in the ring. The referee signals for the next round to begin. Nearby, someone gives advice to stay calm, have a drink, and wait until the right moment, saying the man will agree to almost anything if handled correctly. A large man is ordered to stand up because a guest has arrived. Navin enters the room, pretending to be connected to a supplier, and greets everyone with an easy smile. Song, the trafficker boss who controls the club, studies him carefully, trying to decide what kind of man he is dealing with. Song asks if Navin is seriously requesting 30 children for the weekend. Navin explains that this is not for some private party. The children are meant for shrimp boats leaving out of Eastport. Song is immediately uneasy, saying 30 kids is not a small delivery. To him, that is almost like moving an entire school bus full of children. Navin does not flinch. He offers 3 times the usual market rate to make the job worth Song's trouble. Every dollar will be paid in cash. Then he adds one final condition. He must be allowed to personally choose every child himself. Song bursts into laughter, brushing the request aside like it is ridiculous. He tells Navin that this is not the way their business is handled. Navin stays calm and explains that he only wants to confirm the quality before any money changes hands. Song smirks at him, mocking the idea that he can stroll through the children like he is picking fruit at a market. Before the tension can settle, one of the guards suddenly grabs Navin and yanks him forward, demanding to know who he really is. The man accuses him of being far too dumb to belong to whatever operation he claims to represent. Navin keeps playing his role, insisting he is only there as a messenger for his partner. Then he warns them that the longer they drag this out, the more of his partner's time they are wasting. Song watches him for a moment, amused by the confidence. Instead of killing him right away, he decides he actually likes Navin's boldness. He tells him he will personally take him to choose the kids himself, but when they move toward the exit, the guards outside stop them, saying the gathering is strictly invitation only. Then everything changes in an instant. Someone in the crowd notices a gun. Panic rips through the place as people begin screaming and scattering in every direction. One of the thugs yells for his men to kill whoever brought the weapon inside. Downstairs, a guard rushes to Song and warns him there is a gunman somewhere in the building. Navin immediately insists the gun has nothing to do with him, but Song's patience is gone. The order is given without hesitation. Kill him. Navin has no choice now. He launches into a fight, forcing his way through Song's men as the club collapses into total disorder. One attacker after another goes down while the crowd outside keeps roaring, hungry for the violence to end in blood. Navin breaks free from another thug with bone-cracking force as a microphone above them screeches with sharp feedback. One of the criminals taunts him, telling him to enjoy the party. Navin answers by snapping the next attacker's neck. But Navin is not the only one who has pushed his way into the club. The silent father has also fought his way inside. Seeing Navin in the middle of the chaos, he mistakes him for one of Song's people and grabs him hard. Navin shouts at him to wait. He swears he is not with Song. He quickly tells the silent father that they are both searching for someone. With sirens getting closer outside, Navin urges him to leave with him before the police and Song's backup trap them inside. Guards pound against a door nearby, shouting for reinforcements. Navin promises that if the father comes with him, he can show him everything he knows. Elsewhere, Song takes out his anger on a young informant. He accuses the boy of vouching for a traitor and tells him to come watch his own father die. The boy breaks down, begging for mercy, insisting he is sorry and that he does not want to die. Song's men accuse him of setting them up, asking again and again why he betrayed them. They call him stupid for trusting the wrong people. The other children, frightened and angry, throw the word back at him too. One of the captors warns the children that the bad ones are punished. Another man steps in and orders them to keep the kids alive and ship them out instead. Later, the silent father asks Navin if he knows a mute fighter named Ho. Navin explains that Ho was thrown into Song's fighting ring when he was young, almost as some sick joke. Then Navin realizes they are talking about the same man. He knows Ho too. Navin turns more serious and apologizes for the chaos, explaining that he has been living in hiding and trying to piece this operation together. He tells the father that Song is the biggest human trafficker in the city. His wife, a journalist, had collected the evidence they now have on Song's network. She disappeared while investigating this exact case. Navin says her name was Meisha. He spreads out the photos and documents she left behind so the silent father can look through them. One picture includes a birthday card with the words, "Happy birthday, Daddy." Navin admits he still has not gone through every piece of material Meisha gathered. But from what she discovered, Song constantly moves the children from place to place while checking potential buyers. Then something in one of the photos catches the silent father's attention. Navin notices it too. It is the same truck. A refrigerated delivery truck. Navin realizes the vehicle is perfect for hiding the children. It makes deliveries all over the city, blending into normal traffic without anyone questioning it. Because of the insulation, the cargo area would be completely soundproof. No crying, no screaming, no desperate calls for help would be heard from outside. The factory connected to the truck is only about an hour away, so they head there immediately. When they arrive, Navin is stunned by how open everything is. The whole operation has been sitting in plain sight. The silent father wants to storm in right away, but Navin stops him. Charging blindly into the place will not save Rainey. If they rush too soon, they may lose their only chance, so they wait and watch. But the guards notice movement near the fence. One of them yells for whoever is out there to leave. Within seconds, men pour out from every side of the building. The silent father does not run. He drives straight into the first wave of guards, smashing through them with terrifying speed. One man barely gets close before the father snaps his neck and keeps moving like nothing happened. Someone growls that trespassing is not allowed on his father's land. Then Song appears and opens fire, screaming for the intruder to die. He shouts that they are inside his house now, laughing as he dares them to take the bullets and drop dead. One guard recognizes the silent father from the earlier kidnapping and blurts out, "You again." The father answers with movement instead of words, faking one direction before striking from another. Song's confidence begins to crack as the fight turns against him. Ho, the mute fighter raised by Song since childhood, joins the battle as well. A strange, fierce battle cry echoes through the warehouse. Somewhere nearby, a terrified child sobs in the shadows. The fight becomes uglier and more brutal with every second. Bones break, bodies hit the floor. The silent father finally gets his hands on Song and begins to beat him with pure rage. Navin has to pull him away before he kills him. Then a gunshot cuts through the air. Navin shouts at him, asking if he has lost his mind. Song is still their only lead. If they kill him now, they may never find Rainey. Killing him will not bring his daughter any closer. Navin reminds him that she could still be alive. He insists they are getting closer to her with every passing hour. Meanwhile, the police captain receives news that a fight has broken out at the factory. He assumes it must be the Chinese mute still hunting for his daughter. He also knows the old man behind the operation will want answers about how security failed this badly. Pak Lung responds with calm control, claiming he takes full responsibility for what happened. He lies and says the factory was already empty by the time the attackers arrived. A few men were killed, he admits, but nothing important was lost. He promises to cover any additional costs from his own share of the earnings. After ending the call, Pak Lung drops the polite tone and mutters that this fool is becoming reckless. Back at the factory, Song is tied down and being shocked for information. Navin calls out, warning them that they need him awake, not dead. He says he will handle the questioning himself. Then Navin steps closer to Song and tells him that he has been investigating him for months. The man standing behind him only wants one thing. He wants his little girl back. Navin makes it clear that if Song refuses to talk, then his name will be exposed to the entire world. And even if they decide not to kill him, Song understands that once the truth comes out, his life will not be worth much anyway. Song sneers through the pain and asks Navin if he has any idea what happened to the last reporter who came digging around. He warns him that journalists always think they can handle the truth until they end up buried under it. The silent father immediately reacts, his anger rising as he demands to know if Song is talking about Navin's wife. He orders Song to tell them everything he knows, right there and then. Song keeps repeating that he knows nothing, trying to cling to the lie as long as he can. The silent father presses the wire against him again and shocks him hard. Song finally breaks, gasping for breath. He says he heard about her from a place called the Snake Pit. Then he warns them that nobody who gets taken there ever comes back out alive. Inside the Snake Pit, Rainey sits among the trapped children. A boy tells her there is no escape from this place, but Rainey refuses to accept that. She says they cannot know that unless they at least try. The boy begs her not to pull him into some hopeless plan. Rainey argues that if they do nothing, they are dead for certain anyway. The boy's voice lowers as he admits he has nowhere to return to. He never had a real home, and the traffickers murdered his family right in front of him. Rainey tells him that if she gets out of there, he can come home with her. He looks at her like she has lost her mind and calls her crazy for even suggesting it. At the pier, Song orders his men to prepare the boat. Before he can disappear, Pak Lung arrives and calmly asks where he thinks he is going. He questions whether Song is really planning to run to the boats now. Then his tone sharpens as he asks what Song told the Chinese mute. Back in the Snake Pit, one of the guards comes in to check on the children. He calls for Rainey to come down, saying someone is asking for her. The moment he turns away, Rainey and the boy make their move. They bolt. Rainey shouts for him to keep running and not look back. At the same time, Navin begins a live broadcast from his missing wife's account. For months he has been posting under Meisha's name, trying to keep her investigation alive and make sure people do not forget her. Looking into the camera, he says his own name and hers, making it clear who he is and why he is there. He tells viewers that he is broadcasting from a place known as the Snake Pit. He believes Meisha may be trapped somewhere inside as well. He begs everyone watching to share the stream immediately. If they want to expose this operation, they need people in the streets, watching and reacting in real time. Then he sees something on screen and reacts in shock, barely able to believe what is unfolding. Inside the building, Rainey finally reaches her father. The moment she sees him, she breaks down completely. She sobs and apologizes again and again, overwhelmed by fear and guilt. But even after escaping, she insists she has to go back for the other children. She says they will all be killed, and if she leaves them behind, it will be her fault. Her father comforts her and tells her she did well. Then he gently asks where the rest of the children are being held. Rainey tells him they are locked in a room upstairs. He tells her he will handle it from here and orders her to go home. Navin steps in and says he will stay behind instead. Rainey has done her part, but his work is not finished yet. He tells one of the guards to get her out of the building immediately. In Filipino, a guard radios for help, reporting intruders inside the Snake Pit. Outside, police officers scramble as they try to locate where the live stream is coming from. The captain angrily orders Sergeant Yadong to stand down. Yadong pushes back, arguing that the video clearly shows children being held inside the building. The captain tells him to clear the street and let it go. Another officer tries to block Yadong from moving forward, but Yadong tells him plainly to get out of the way. He looks at the captain in disbelief, asking if he is actually serious about ignoring what is happening right in front of them. Inside, one of the guards shouts that the intruders have already reached the upper floor. A trafficker orders his men to keep the children together because they are moving out. The kids scream as they are dragged toward the exit. Rainey fights against the men holding her, twisting and struggling until she breaks free hard enough to snap one man's grip. In Mandarin, she calls out to her father, telling him they are here to help. Guards rush to grab her again as she keeps shouting. Her father tears through them, breaking bones and clearing a path with brutal precision. Rainey tells him that some of her friends are still trapped upstairs. The boy she helped escape calls out for her to wait. Rainey urges the children forward, telling them to move quickly, run, and not stop. The boy asks in Mandarin why she came back when she had already escaped. Rainey tells him that even if he has no family left, he still has friends. He calls her an idiot for risking herself, and she throws it right back, saying they are all idiots together. Up above, more trapped children look down from a high ledge, frightened and unsure how to get down safely. Rainey tells them to use a makeshift rope. In Filipino, the children shout instructions to one another, telling each other to tie the knots as tightly as possible. Rainey calls up, reminding them to climb down slowly and carefully. Outside, a woman in the crowd begs the police to let them help. She shouts that the children are the ones they should be concerned about, not the chain of command. Rainey waves for the next child to climb down the rope. People in the crowd begin yelling at the officers, accusing them of standing around and doing nothing. Some call them cowards for refusing to save the kids. Yadong finally turns away from the captain and speaks to his own unit. He tells them to come with him. He says they can no longer pretend they do not see what is happening. An officer is ordered to remove Sasha for disobeying the captain's command, but the captain barks at Sasha himself, ordering him to stand down. He repeats the order, demanding obedience from his sergeant one more time. Yadong ignores the pressure and tells his squad to cover the exit. Upstairs, the boy tells Rainey that it is her turn to climb down now. Before she goes, he thanks her and says he owes her his life. Rainey tells him she will see him outside, but as the last children try to escape, a guard is cut down while attempting to stop them. The scene explodes into panic as gunfire breaks out near the exit. People scream and scatter. The boy calls out in fear, asking if Rainey is okay. She shouts back that she is fine. Another gunshot cracks through the chaos as guards try to seize control of the exit again. Then the police finally storm the building, shouting for everyone to freeze and drop their weapons. One guard calls over the radio for medics to help the children. An officer comforts one of the rescued kids, telling them they do not have to be afraid anymore. Another officer asks whether Rainey's father was found inside too. Someone explains that the woman connected to the rescue is the journalist whose reporting helped lead them there. Soon after, the news reports that unrest broke out during the live-streamed rescue. Dozens of trafficked children were pulled from a downtown building, turning the hidden operation into a public scandal. The news report reveals that the building used in the rescue is connected to a powerful local businessman named Kun Tai Luo. But before the broadcast can continue, a phone begins ringing, abruptly pulling the attention of someone watching it. At the mansion, a woman is quietly told that her father wants to see her. Her husband, the police captain, is brought in to face the old man. The message is clear. The police captain has arrived, not as family, but as someone who must answer for what happened. The old man looks at him with cold disappointment and says that, speaking as one father to another, what he has done is revolting. He says he could understand weapons. He could even understand drugs, but children are something else entirely. Then he asks why loyalty seems to matter only when there is money attached to it. Pak Lung loses his temper, reminding everyone that he warned them this man would become a problem. Now, because of him, they are all left trying to clean up the damage. The captain is grabbed by the guards and immediately starts shouting that he is still a police officer, but the old man is not moved. He reminds him that he brought him into this family. He gave him his own daughter, trusted him with that bond, and this is how he chose to repay him. Then, without hesitation, the old man takes a blade and drives it into him himself. His daughter watches in horror, unable to understand what is happening. All she can do is ask why, again and again, as the man she married collapses in front of her. At the police station, an officer gives Navin his statement and asks him to sign it. She tells him that she can testify that his actions were self-defense, but officially, she still cannot let him walk out until bail is approved. She assures him that his daughter will be cared for until then. Then she looks at him more closely and asks the question everyone keeps asking. Who is he really? Navin gives the simplest answer he can. He tells her he is only a father. Later, the silent father comes to visit Navin at the station. Everything that happened, all those children making it out alive, only happened because Rainey chose to turn back instead of saving herself. Navin admits something painful. On the night Meisha disappeared, she called him. At the time, he wanted them both to leave the country and start over somewhere safer. In truth, he wanted to protect only their own lives, but Meisha could not let go of the missing children. She was too close to the truth, and he never understood just how close until she was already gone. Now all he can hope is that when he finds her, she will somehow forgive him. Elsewhere, one of Navin's colleagues praises what he managed to do that day. She jokingly asks whether that means she is getting a promotion. Meanwhile, the silent father tells Rainey that it is time for them to go home. A guard warns them they only have 5 minutes left. At their new house, the guards disguised as renovation workers complain about the ongoing repairs. One of them says he will go take a look at the breaker box. Nearby, hidden just out of view, a gunman quietly readies his weapon. Thunder rolls outside at the exact moment the gunman fires, covering the sound as the guard is shot down. Then more gunshots tear through the house. Another attacker corners Rainey and warns her not to make even the smallest sound. Rainey whispers that her father is in danger, but the gunman orders her to stay still and not move. 2 more shots echo from upstairs. Her father shouts for her to find the key. He tells her to keep holding on just a little longer. He urges her to keep pushing and not give up. An armed man is suddenly ordered to stop exactly where he is. Police move in, demanding that he drop his weapon. Nearby, Navin is on the floor, groaning in pain, badly wounded and barely able to move. In the chaos, Rainey cries out for her father. Then Pak Lung finally comes face to face with the silent father. He says he must be the mute everyone has been talking about. Pak Lung then reveals that he was once going to become a father himself. In his twisted mind, he blames the silent father for stealing that future from him. The two men crash into each other in a savage close-range fight. The silent father shouts for Rainey to run. He tells her to hurry, but she screams as men grab her and pull her back away from him. He yells again, desperate for her to escape. Neither fighter backs down. They trade brutal strikes, each one refusing to fall. Later, Rainey is still running through the storm, exhausted and gasping for breath. She stumbles hard, groaning from the pain, but forces herself back onto her feet. A broken arrow drops onto the ground beside her. Even hurt, she keeps pushing forward. Someone screams that the silent father killed their father. Ho, still fighting on Pak Lung's side, cries out in rage. But Pak Lung turns on Ho with cruelty instead. He mocks him, asking if he truly believed Cowboy was ever his father. Then he tells him the truth as sharply as possible. Ho was never Song's son. Pak Lung cuts him off with a scream before he can fully react. Rainey shouts at Pak Lung, calling him evil. The fight continues without slowing, growing more desperate with every second. But Ho is shaken by what he has just learned. The truth finally breaks whatever loyalty he had left. He turns against Pak Lung's men and stabs one of them, refusing to obey them any longer. Pak Lung then turns his attention to Navin, taunting him about the reporter. He asks if Navin was the one who gave Meisha the ring she wore. Then he confirms the worst thing Navin could hear. Meisha did not die quickly. She suffered for a long time. Pak Lung throws something toward him and tells him that if he wants it back, he should come and take it. He keeps provoking him, daring him to attack. Navin, consumed by grief and rage, charges forward and slashes at him. This time, Pak Lung is badly wounded and finally drops. Even bleeding and weakened, he roars in defiance, refusing to show fear. The fight reaches its most chaotic and painful point. Someone screams as everything collapses around them. Ho, now dying, weakly calls out to his friend and says he found her. But before he can finish what he is trying to say, his voice fades away. Pak Lung, still not finished, grabs Rainey. He tells her father that now he will finally watch a daughter die. The silent father calls out, asking if Rainey is okay. Pak Lung tells him this is simply the fate waiting for him and orders him to accept it. Then there is the sickening sound of bone breaking as the father escapes the threat holding him back. Pak Lung shouts, still refusing to surrender. Rainey cries out for her dad again. She begs them to stop fighting. Her panic grows as she screams for him. Rainey screams for her father, while the boy beside her cries out for his uncle. She begs him to wake up and not close his eyes. The boy joins her, pleading with him not to die. Pak Lung finally begins to choke and retch, completely defeated. In his last confused moments, his mind drifts somewhere else. He murmurs that he has to go home. He talks about a wife and daughter who are already gone, as if they are still waiting for him. The father looks at him and simply says goodbye in his own quiet way. Pak Lung speaks the name of his unborn child one final time. Mariah, Rainey, and the boy rush to her father's side, crying out for him. She calls him dad again and again. For a moment, the three of them sit together in silence, with no words strong enough for what they have survived. Later, by the water, Navin tells him that the entire trafficking ring has been taken down. Then he admits that after everything they went through together, he still does not even know his friend's real name. The silent father finally answers. His name is Wang Wei. He tells Navin that if a person is brave enough to change himself, then he can change the world too. This time the words feel different, not like a lesson, like a truth he has earned. Wang Wei. Sometime later, Rainey is dressed beautifully, and Wang Wei tells her she looks pretty. She asks if he is finally ready to tell her his story. He begins softly, "When I first met your mother." Every once in a while, an action movie comes along that does not politely ask for your attention. It grabs you by the collar, throws you into the room, and dares you to look away. That is basically what The Furious feels like. This is not the kind of movie you walk into expecting layered psychology, quiet character studies, or some deeply complicated crime saga. Honestly, that is not what it is trying to be. The Furious knows exactly what it is selling, and it sells it with both fists, both knees, probably a hammer, maybe a ladder, and whatever else happens to be lying around in the room. And for action fans, that is the appeal. There are movies where you admire the action. Then there are movies where the action makes you physically react in your seat. This is the second kind. The kind where you laugh, not because something is funny, but because a fight scene just did something so ridiculous, so sharp, so perfectly timed, that your brain needs a second to catch up. You sit there thinking, wait, are they actually doing this? And then the movie somehow goes even harder. That is where The Furious becomes special. It is brutal, fast, messy in the best way, and completely committed to its own madness. It does not feel like a film that was built around safe studio notes or clean little trailer moments. It feels like a bunch of people who genuinely love martial arts cinema got together and decided, let's see how far we can push this before somebody tells us to stop. And nobody stopped them. Now, is it perfect? No, not even close, depending on what you care about. The story is simple. The emotional material is there, but it is not always explored with much depth. Some of the dialogue and dramatic scenes do not land as strongly as the action does. There are definitely moments where you can feel the movie saying, look, just get through this part, the next fight is coming. But the thing is, the next fight usually is coming. And it is usually insane. That is why a lot of the flaws almost start to feel smaller while you are watching it. Not because they are invisible, but because the film's strengths are so loud, so physical, and so entertaining that they keep overpowering everything else. You are not watching The Furious for a perfectly polished dramatic experience. You are watching it for impact, for rhythm, for bodies crashing through spaces, for choreography that keeps finding one more idea when you think the scene has already peaked. And that is the reason this movie has hit so hard with action fans. It gives you the feeling people chase when they talk about The Raid, John Wick, old Hong Kong fight cinema, or those martial arts films you discover and immediately want to force your friends to watch. It has that same you need to see this energy. Maybe some viewers will find it too violent. Maybe some will think the story is too thin. Maybe others will wait for streaming and be perfectly fine with that. Fair enough. But if you love action movies, not just casual action, but real, full-body, bruising, creatively staged martial arts chaos, then The Furious is absolutely one of those films you should not ignore. It is rough around the edges, sure, but it is alive. And in modern action cinema, that kind of raw energy is becoming harder and harder to find. The story of The Furious is about as straightforward as action movie storytelling gets. A father's daughter is taken. The people responsible are part of a criminal trafficking ring, and from that point on, the movie basically says, all right, now watch this man tear through everyone in his way. That is the setup. Clean, familiar, and honestly, not very original. You have seen versions of this before. Taken is the obvious comparison. Man on Fire comes to mind too. Even a bunch of Jason Statham-style revenge thrillers have lived in the same territory. Someone's family is taken, the wrong man is pushed too far, and suddenly every bad guy in the city has made the worst mistake of their life. So no, The Furious is not winning points for reinventing the revenge thriller. But here is the thing, it does not really need to. Sometimes a simple story works because it gives the movie a strong enough reason to move, and that is exactly what happens here. The plot is not complicated, but it is clear. You understand what Wang wants. You understand why he cannot stop. You understand why every fight matters to him, even when the movie itself is more interested in the physical chaos than the emotional details. And honestly, that simplicity helps the film more than it hurts it. A more complicated plot might have slowed this thing down. More twists, more exposition, more crime world politics, all of that could have easily gotten in the way. The Furious is not built like a mystery. It is built like a charge forward. One door opens, another fight starts. One enemy falls, another one steps in. The story is basically the fuse, and the action is the explosion. That does not mean the writing is especially deep. It is not. The kidnapping premise is familiar, the criminals are familiar, and the emotional beats are pretty direct. But for this kind of movie, direct is not always a bad word. There is something effective about a story that does not waste time pretending to be more complicated than it is. A father wants his daughter back. That is enough. The movie understands that as long as the motivation is strong, the audience will follow the violence. We do not need a long speech explaining his pain. We do not need 5 flashbacks spelling out every piece of his past. We just need to feel that once this man starts moving, nothing is going to stop him. And The Furious does that very well. It takes the most basic revenge movie setup imaginable and uses it as a launchpad for something much bigger, louder, and nastier than the plot description suggests. On paper, it sounds like another familiar rescue thriller. In motion, it becomes this relentless martial arts assault where the simplicity of the story almost becomes part of the appeal. Because at some point, you stop asking whether the plot is new. You start asking how the next poor guy is going to survive being in the same room as this father. The darker side of The Furious is what gives the movie its initial punch, even before the actual punches start flying. Because this is not just a random revenge story where someone steals a car. takes a briefcase, or messes with the wrong retired assassin. The central crime here is child trafficking. Wang's daughter is taken, other children are caught in the same nightmare, and suddenly the movie has a much uglier emotional foundation than a simple bad guys need to be beaten up setup. And to be fair, that immediately gives the story weight. You do not need a complicated explanation for why this father is willing to break every bone in the room. The moment his daughter disappears into that criminal system, the movie has already done enough to make his rage understandable. It is personal, it is horrifying, and it gives every fight scene this extra layer of desperation. He is not fighting for pride. He is not fighting to prove he is the toughest man alive. He is fighting because stopping is not an option. At the same time, this is where the movie gets a little tricky, because The Furious touches on some genuinely disturbing subjects: child trafficking, criminal exploitation, corruption, violence against vulnerable people, but it does not really sit with them for long. It brings those ideas into the story, uses them to light the fuse, and then moves straight into action mode. The emotional horror is there, but the film does not slow down enough to explore it in a deep or uncomfortable way. Some viewers might find that frustrating, and honestly, I get it. A subject this heavy could have supported a much more serious crime drama. You could make an entire film just about the emotional damage, the fear, the system behind it, the people who look away, the families left behind. But The Furious is not that movie. It is using this darkness as motivation, not as its main investigation. That does not mean the emotion is absent, though. What keeps the premise from feeling completely empty is the father's urgency. The film may not fully unpack the larger tragedy, but it understands the immediate human one. A parent loses a child. A man is pushed into a world that is cruel, violent, and much bigger than him. And instead of collapsing under that fear, he turns all of it into motion. That is the emotional engine of the film. The corruption around him also matters because it makes the mission feel more hopeless. It is not just one villain hiding in one room. It is a whole system of criminals, enforcers, people in power, and people who benefit from staying silent. So every step forward feels like Wang is punching through another layer of something rotten. Still, the movie is not subtle about any of this. It is not trying to be. The good people are desperate, the bad people are disgusting, and the moral line is drawn in thick black ink. But for this type of action cinema, that bluntness kind of works. It gives the audience permission to fully root for the violence, because the targets are presented as people who have earned every bit of punishment coming their way. So yes, The Furious uses heavy subject matter in a very action-driven way. It does not explore the darkness as deeply as it could. It does not pause for long emotional reflection, but it does give the film a reason to feel angry. And that anger is important. Without it, the movie would just be a collection of brutal fight scenes. With it, those fight scenes feel like a father trying to rip his way through an entire underworld before it swallows his daughter completely. Now, as much as The Furious works as a pure action experience, this is where the movie starts showing its bruises. The script is thin, very thin, honestly. And the strange thing is, you can tell the movie is aware of that sometimes. It keeps things moving so aggressively that it almost dares you to stop and ask questions. Why is this character here? Why does this side plot matter? Why are the villains doing anything beyond being evil enough to get kicked through a wall later? Most of the time, the answer is simple, because the next fight needs to happen. That is not automatically a deal-breaker, especially in a martial arts movie built around momentum. But it does mean the dramatic scenes do not always carry the weight they are supposed to. The emotional beats are there. A missing daughter, a reporter connected to the case, a criminal syndicate, corrupt systems, families being destroyed. On paper, that should be heavy stuff, but the movie rarely gives those ideas enough space to breathe. Instead, a lot of the character writing feels functional. People exist to push the mission forward, explain something quickly, or create a reason for another violent encounter. And once you notice that, some of the quieter scenes can feel a bit flat, not unbearable, just not as alive as the action. The dialogue does not help either. There are lines that feel awkward, clunky, or just weirdly translated. Sometimes the words do not sound like natural conversation. They sound like dialogue that was built to deliver information and then get out of the way. And when the film is trying to be emotional, that can be a problem, because instead of feeling the pain of the moment, you start noticing how unnatural the line delivery feels. That is probably one reason the silent protagonist works better than he should. Wang does not have to explain everything. He does not have to fight through bad speeches. He just has to look broken, angry, focused, and ready to move. Zai Miao can sell that physically, and honestly, the movie benefits from not forcing him into too many dramatic monologues. But for everyone around him, the writing is more exposed. The side characters do not always get enough personality. The villains are mostly bad because the movie needs them to be bad. Some extra details are thrown in here and there, but they do not really deepen them in a meaningful way. You get the sense that the film wants to add texture, but it is much more confident staging a fight than building a layered scene between people. And that is the trade-off with The Furious. When bodies are moving, the movie feels almost unstoppable. When people are standing around talking, it can feel like the film is waiting for itself to become exciting again. Still, I do not think the weak script ruins the movie. Not for what this is. The story gives us enough motivation to care, and the performances give us just enough human feeling to keep the violence from becoming completely empty. But it is definitely the area where the film feels least polished. If the action is operating at a 10, the writing is somewhere much lower. And maybe that is why The Furious feels so uneven on paper, but so powerful in motion. It is not a great drama hiding inside an action movie. It is an action movie dragging a basic drama behind it, and somehow, because the action is that good, the whole thing still keeps moving. Wang Wei is an interesting kind of action hero because he barely gives the movie words to work with. He is not the guy who walks into a room and delivers a cold one-liner before breaking somebody's jaw. He is not explaining his past, giving speeches about justice, or telling the villains exactly how badly they messed up. Most of the time, he just looks at the situation, absorbs what has happened, and moves. And honestly, that silence is a big part of why he works. There is something scary about a character who does not need to announce his rage. Wang's anger is not loud, it is locked in. You can see it in the way he carries himself, in how quickly he reacts, in how little space there is between him and violence once his daughter is taken. He does not feel like a man trying to look cool. He feels like a man whose entire world has been reduced to one purpose: find his daughter. That is it. Everything else is just something standing in the way. Zai Miao does a lot with that stillness. Because when a character does not speak, the performance has to come through the body, the eyes, the timing, the tension in the face. And he gives Wang this focused, almost haunted quality. He is not just a fighting machine, even though the movie absolutely treats him like one at times. There is a father underneath all of that brutality, and that matters. You feel that his violence is coming from panic as much as rage. That is what keeps him from becoming just another unstoppable action hero. Yes, the movie pushes his endurance to ridiculous levels. Yes, there are moments where he survives things that would leave a normal person finished. But emotionally, the idea is simple enough to stay believable. This man cannot afford to stop. Not because he is invincible, but because stopping means accepting the worst possible outcome. At the same time, the movie never fully explains him, and that can be frustrating. Why is he mute? What exactly is his background? How did this ordinary-looking tradesman become so terrifying in a fight? The film hints that there is more to him, but it does not really open that door. Maybe that mystery is supposed to make him feel more mythic, more like a force than a fully explained person. But there are definitely moments where the silence feels less like character design and more like the script avoiding a problem. Because after a while, the movie has to work around him. That is where Navin comes in, and you can feel the story leaning on him to do some of the talking Wang cannot do. Sometimes it works, because the team-up gives the movie a little more movement outside the fights. But sometimes it makes Wang's silence feel like a limitation the filmmakers are trying to patch over. Still, when the movie is in motion, Wang's quietness becomes one of its strongest weapons. He does not need to tell us he is desperate. The fights tell us. The way he throws himself into danger tells us. The way he keeps going after being beaten, cut, smashed, and pushed past any normal human limit tells us. His body becomes the dialogue, and for a movie like The Furious, that is probably the right choice. Wang Wei may not be deeply written in the traditional sense, but he has presence, he has purpose. He has that silent, relentless quality that action cinema loves when it is done right. You do not come away knowing every detail about him, but you understand the one thing that matters most. Someone took his child. And now the entire criminal underworld has to deal with the consequences. Navin is where The Furious tries to widen the story beyond just one father and one missing daughter, because Wang's pain is the center of the movie, no question. That is the engine, but Navin brings in another personal loss, another angle on the same criminal world. His connection comes through the reporter in his life, someone who is looking into the same trafficking ring before getting pulled into its violence. So suddenly the story is not only about a kidnapped child, it is about two separate families being shattered by the same system. And on paper, that is a smart move. It gives Wang someone to bounce off, even if Wang himself barely speaks. It also keeps the movie from becoming one silent man walking from fight to fight with nobody to carry the human side of the story. Navin adds urgency, frustration, and a more verbal emotional presence. He can ask questions. He can react out loud. He can push scenes forward in a way Wang, by design, cannot. Joe Taslim helps a lot here. He has that natural screen warmth that makes Navin easy to follow. Even when the dialogue is not doing him many favors, he brings enough charisma and physical confidence to make the character feel useful. You believe he belongs in the action. You believe he has his own reason to be there. And when he steps into the fights, he does not feel like a sidekick being dragged along by the real hero. He feels dangerous in his own right. But the problem is, the writing does not always give Navin the weight he should have. His personal tragedy should feel just as sharp as Wang's, but sometimes it plays more like a plot function. He enters the story because Wang needs an ally, and honestly, because the movie needs someone who can speak more freely. Since Wang is silent, Navin often becomes the person who explains, reacts, and fills in the gaps. That is useful structurally, but it also makes him feel a little mechanical at times. Like the movie needed a voice, so it gave Wang one in human form. That is not to say Navin is bad, not at all. In fact, he makes the film more watchable in the quieter moments. His presence gives the story a little more shape, and his connection to the reporter adds another reason to hate the people behind the trafficking ring. But the subplot itself does not always land with the emotional force it could have had. You can feel the movie reaching for a bigger tragedy, a father trying to save his daughter, a husband or partner trying to find the woman he loves. Two men from different places being pushed into the same violent current. That could have been really powerful if the film spent more time developing the emotional side of it, but the Furious is impatient. It keeps glancing at these human details, then immediately turns back toward the next fight. And because the action is so strong, you mostly go with it. Still, there is a part of you that can see the better drama hiding underneath the chaos. Navin's story is one of those pieces that feels like it had more potential than the script fully used. Even so, the team-up works where it matters most. Wang brings the silent rage. Navin brings the voice, the urgency, and his own kind of pain. Together, they give the movie a little more emotional texture than it would have had with only one unstoppable father tearing through bad guys. It is not a perfectly balanced partnership. Wang is clearly the heart of the film, but Navin gives the journey a second pulse, and in a movie this aggressive, that extra pulse helps keep the violence from feeling completely one note. One of the reasons The Furious works as well as it does is because the cast understands the kind of movie they are in. This is not a film where every performance is built around long emotional speeches or subtle dramatic layering. A lot of the acting here is physical. It is in the way someone enters a room, how they square up before a fight, how they take a hit, how they sell exhaustion, pain, anger, fear, and that little flash of panic when the fight suddenly turns against them. And on that level, the main cast really delivers. Zai Miao is the obvious anchor. As Wang Wei, he has to carry a lot without saying much, and that is not easy. A silent action hero can become boring very quickly if the actor does not have enough presence. But Zai Miao has that controlled intensity. He does not need to overplay anything. He looks like a man who is holding himself together by force, and once the violence starts, you feel that pressure finally breaking loose. What makes him stand out is that he does not just look skilled. He looks emotionally locked into the movement. Every punch feels like it has purpose behind it. Every desperate push forward feels connected to the fact that this is a father trying to get his child back. That is what separates him from just being the guy who fights well. He gives the action a pulse. Joe Taslim brings a different kind of energy as Navin. He is more open, more expressive, and naturally more charismatic in the traditional sense. Since Wang is silent, Taslim ends up carrying a lot of the verbal weight, and even when the dialogue is not great, he keeps the character from feeling lifeless. He has warmth on screen, but he also has that believable physical danger where you never question whether he can hold his own once things turn ugly. And that matters because this movie cannot afford weak action performers. The fights are too demanding. The camera is too close to the movement. You cannot fake your way through scenes like this with quick cutting and shaky framing. The performers have to actually move, react, fall, strike, and keep the rhythm alive. That is where the cast earns a lot of respect. You can feel the effort. You can feel the training. You can feel how much coordination is happening inside every chaotic-looking moment. The supporting cast adds a lot too. Brian Lee makes a strong impression, the kind of role where you immediately understand why people walked away talking about him. He has that physical sharpness that catches your eye even in a movie packed with fighters. Yeon Ruhian, of course, brings his usual danger. The second he appears, anyone who knows action cinema already starts waiting for the movie to unleash him properly. Joey Iwanaga also adds a memorable villain presence, bringing a different fighting style and a clean physical confidence to his scenes. Even the younger performers deserve credit. The child actors could have easily been used only as emotional props, but they are better than that. They do not overdo it. They give the danger enough reality without turning every scene into forced melodrama. Wang's daughter especially gives the story a little more heart than the script sometimes provides on its own. Now, not every performance lands. Some of the side characters feel stiff. A few police characters and smaller roles come off awkward, especially when the dialogue starts working against them. There are moments where the acting suddenly feels less like a serious action thriller and more like an old dubbed martial arts movie from another era. Depending on your taste, that might be charming or distracting. For me, it is a bit of both. But the important thing is this: when the movie needs its cast to fight, they show up. And in The Furious, that is not a small thing. This is a film where screen presence is measured in bruises, speed, footwork, timing, and whether you can make a fight feel like it is actually costing you something. The best performers here do exactly that. They give the movie its physical credibility, so even when the writing gets rough, the cast keeps the film moving, not always through dialogue, not always through traditional drama, but through bodies in motion, through intensity, through that rare feeling that the people on screen are not just acting inside the action. They are the action. The villains in The Furious are not exactly complicated people. Let's be honest about that right away. Most of them are written in very broad strokes. They are cruel, violent, corrupt, and disgusting enough that the movie never has to work too hard to make you hate them. There is no grand moral debate here, no tragic villain philosophy, no layered backstory that makes you sit there wondering how they became this way. They are bad people doing horrible things, and the movie mostly uses them as bodies standing between Wang and his daughter. And for a film like this, that is both a weakness and, weirdly, part of the design. Because as characters, the villains are thin. Some details get tossed in, like personal relationships or little hints of background, but they do not really add much. You can feel the script trying to give certain bad guys a bit more texture, but it never goes deep enough for them to become fully interesting outside the fights. They are not the kind of villains you remember because of great writing. You remember them because of what they do physically. That is where The Furious is much stronger. Even when the villains are simple on the page, several of them have real screen impact. They look dangerous. They move differently. They bring different kinds of threat into the action scenes. And in a martial arts movie, that matters a lot. Brian Liu is a good example. He has this sharp, intense presence that immediately stands out. He does not need pages of dialogue to feel like a problem. You see him, you see the way he carries himself, and you understand this is not just another disposable henchman waiting to be knocked down. There is a physical confidence to him that makes his scenes pop. Yan Ruhian brings a different kind of excitement. At this point, if you know him from the raid, the moment he shows up, your brain already starts preparing for violence. That is the power of casting someone with that kind of action reputation. Even before he fully gets unleashed, his presence creates anticipation. You are not watching him thinking, what is his emotional motivation? You are thinking, okay, when is this guy going to explode? And when the movie lets these fighters loose, that is when the villains finally become memorable. Joey Iwanaga also adds flavor because his physical style feels distinct. The movie benefits from having enemies who do not all fight the same way. Some are more brutal, some are faster, some bring a more technical edge. Some just feel like walking walls of muscle and anger. The writing may not give them much interior life, but the choreography gives them identity. That is probably the best way to understand the villains in this movie. They are not deep, dramatic characters. They are action obstacles with personality built through movement. Their fighting styles, their weapons, their body language, and their willingness to go further than expected become their characterization. In a better written version of the film, maybe they would have been both physically memorable and dramatically interesting. Here, you mostly get the first one. The main villain suffers from this the most. The movie clearly wants him to feel important, but he is still pretty generic as a character. He represents the evil system more than he feels like a fully formed person. He is there to be hated, feared, and eventually confronted. That is enough for the plot, but not enough to make him a truly great villain. Still, there is something satisfying about how straightforward the movie is with its bad guys. It does not ask you to sympathize with them. It does not soften them. It does not waste time pretending they are misunderstood. These are people involved in something so ugly that the audience is basically waiting for the punishment to begin. And because the action is so vicious, the movie turns that waiting into a kind of brutal payoff. So yes, the villains are generic, but they are not useless. They give the heroes bodies to crash into, styles to overcome, and escalating threats to survive. They may not be unforgettable as written characters, but as physical opponents, several of them leave a mark. And in The Furious, that physical mark counts for a lot. The real reason people are going to talk about The Furious is not the plot. It is the fighting. That sounds obvious for a martial arts movie, I know, but there is a difference between a movie having fight scenes and a movie being built out of fight scenes with this much force, imagination, and actual physical personality. The Furious does not treat action like a bonus. It treats action like the language of the whole film, and honestly, that is where it becomes kind of ridiculous, in a good way. The choreography here has that rare quality where it feels planned down to the smallest beat, but still looks like everyone is fighting for their life. You can tell the movements are designed, rehearsed, and carefully shaped, but the impact does not feel soft. It does not feel like actors politely waiting for their turn. It feels mean. It feels desperate. It feels like every person in the room is trying to end the other one as quickly as possible. That is what gives the action its bite. A lot of modern action movies try to create energy by cutting fast. They shake the camera, hide the movement, throw in a loud sound effect, and hope the audience feels intensity. The Furious does not need to cheat like that. The intensity is already there in the bodies. The fighters are moving fast, but the movie still lets you understand what is happening. You see the space, you see the hits, you see the little adjustments, the counters, the mistakes, the recoveries. And those little details matter. Someone ducks too late. Someone blocks one strike but does not see the next one coming. A fighter changes rhythm mid-combination. A weapon gets knocked away, and suddenly the whole room becomes the weapon. These fights are not just hero punches villain, villain punches hero. They keep evolving while you are watching them. That is why the choreography feels alive. It is brutal, yes, but it is also weirdly elegant at times. Not elegant in a clean, polished, ballet-like way, more like controlled chaos. The kind where a person gets smashed into furniture, rolls out of it, grabs something off the floor, and suddenly the fight has shifted into a completely new shape. You are watching violence, but you are also watching timing, spacing, rhythm, and creativity. The film understands that a great fight scene needs escalation. It cannot just start loud and stay loud. It has to build. It has to surprise you. It has to make you think, okay, that was the big moment, and then immediately prove you wrong. The Furious does that again and again. Just when a fight seems like it has used every possible idea, the choreography finds one more. A different angle, a new object, a nastier hit, a change in fighting style, something. That constant invention is what keeps the action from feeling empty. Even when the story is thin, the fights have structure. They tell many stories inside themselves. Who has control? Who is losing stamina? Who is adapting faster? Who is getting desperate? You can follow that without anyone explaining it. The choreography does the storytelling that the script sometimes cannot, and that is probably the highest compliment I can give the movie. The best scenes in The Furious do not just look cool. They make you feel the characters thinking through violence. They are not randomly throwing moves at each other. They are reading the room, reading the opponent, and trying to survive the next 3 seconds. That gives the action a sharpness that a lot of movies miss. It is also just insanely fun to watch. There are moments where the fighting becomes so intense, so creatively nasty, that you almost laugh out of disbelief. Not because it is silly, exactly, but because the movie keeps raising the bar in ways that feel impossible. You keep waiting for it to run out of ideas, and somehow it keeps finding more. That is why the choreography is not just the best part of The Furious. It is the movie. Everything else exists around it. The simple revenge plot, the underwritten villains, the clunky dialogue, even the emotional motivation, all of it is there to push us into these fights. And when the action is operating at this level, that bargain mostly works. Because when The Furious starts moving, it reminds you what martial arts cinema can do when the performers, camera, editing, and choreography all trust the audience enough to actually show the work. You feel the hits, you see the craft. And for action fans, that is the whole reason to show up. One thing The Furious understands better than a lot of modern action movies is that a fight scene should not feel like it could happen in an empty white room. The space matters. That sounds simple, but it makes a huge difference. In this movie, the characters are not just trading punches in front of the camera. They are constantly using whatever is around them. A ladder, a hammer, a door, a bow, an arrow, some random tool on the floor. If it exists in the room, there is a good chance somebody is going to get hit with it, thrown into it, trapped by it, or forced to fight around it. And that gives the action this really nasty kind of creativity. You never feel like the fights are just repeating the same rhythm over and over. Even when the movie is basically moving from one brawl to the next, the environment keeps changing the flavor. A room becomes a trap, a hallway becomes a pressure cooker. A simple object suddenly becomes the most dangerous thing in the scene. It keeps you watching the background, because anything can become part of the choreography. That is where the movie feels closest to classic martial arts cinema and old-school Hong Kong action. The best action movies do not just ask, how strong is this fighter? They ask, how smart is this fighter when the situation changes? and The Furious is full of that. Characters adapt mid-fight. They lose weapons, grab new ones, switch angles, change their footing, and react to whatever the other person throws at them. It is not clean. It is not polite. It feels like survival. The hammer fight is probably the easiest example to point to. There's just something instantly satisfying about watching a movie take a basic tool and turn it into a full-on action centerpiece. It has that old boy echo, obviously, but it does not feel like the film is only winking at another movie. It uses the hammer because it fits this world. This is a dirty, painful, improvised kind of violence. Nobody is waiting for the perfect weapon. They use what is there, and the film keeps expanding that idea. You get hand-to-hand combat, but then it folds in weapons. You get weapons, but then the setting itself becomes part of the fight. You get clean martial arts movement, but then suddenly the scene turns into grappling, groundwork, throws, dirty counters, close-range panic. That variety is one of the biggest reasons the movie stays exciting for so long. It is not just kung fu in one flavor. There are shades of different styles moving through the film. You can feel the old-school directness of Chinese martial arts. You can see more grounded, close-contact work in the grappling and throws. There are moments that bring in judo, Wing Chun, Bajakwin, Pencak Silat, MMA-style exchanges, and that rough Indonesian action energy people associate with films like The Raid. The movie does not stop to lecture you about those styles, thankfully. It just lets them collide, and that is more fun anyway, because when different fighting styles meet, the scenes feel less predictable. One fighter might be sharper with strikes, another is better at controlling the body, another feels more animalistic, more explosive, someone else uses distance, speed, or weapons. The movie keeps letting these approaches crash into each other, and that gives the fights personality. That is important because action can become boring when everyone moves the same. Here, the best sequences have texture. You are not only watching who wins, you are watching how they fight, how they solve problems, how they deal with pain, how quickly they adjust when the opponent is not giving them the kind of fight they expected. And again, the objects make all of this even better. A fight in The Furious can start as a clean martial arts exchange and turn into something completely chaotic within seconds. Somebody grabs a tool. Somebody gets slammed into furniture. Somebody uses the room to create distance. Somebody else closes that distance immediately. The geography keeps shifting, but the action usually stays readable, which is the key. The movie is wild, but you are not lost. That is why the environmental combat works so well. It does not feel like random chaos thrown at the screen. It feels designed, but still dangerous. It feels like the characters are thinking with their bodies, using the room faster than most people could even process it. And when that clicks, The Furious becomes more than just brutal. It becomes inventive. A lot of action movies give you violence. This one gives you violence with tools, rhythm, style, movement, and a room full of bad decisions waiting to happen. The thing about The Furious is that it does not really have one action scene that the whole movie depends on. It has several. That is part of why the film hits as hard as it does. It is not saving everything for the last 20 minutes and asking you to sit through a dull movie until then. From early on, it keeps throwing these set pieces at you that feel like they were designed to make action fans lean forward and go, okay, wait, how far are they taking this? And usually the answer is, farther than expected. The first major fight already tells you what kind of movie you are watching. It is not clean, glossy, or overly polished. It has this rough physical energy where the bodies actually feel like they are crashing into each other. The movie is not interested in making violence look cool in a detached way. It wants you to feel the impact. It wants the hits to look painful. It wants the room to feel dangerous. Then you get moments like the hammer fight, and that is where the movie really starts showing off its personality. A hammer is such a simple thing, but in the right action scene, it becomes terrifying. Every swing feels ugly. Every miss still feels dangerous. And because The Furious is so committed to using ordinary objects in brutal ways, scenes like this stick in your head. It is not just, here is another fight. It is, here is a fight built around one nasty idea, and we are going to squeeze every bit of tension out of it. The truck chase also gives the movie this almost ridiculous action hero energy. You can question the realism, obviously. You probably should. But in the moment, it has that wild, old-school feeling where a character's determination becomes bigger than logic. Wang is not moving like a normal man anymore. He is moving like pure panic and rage with legs. And honestly, that is the kind of thing a movie like this can get away with when the tone is already operating at such an extreme level. There are also the more specialized fights, like the MMA scene and the ice scene. The MMA scene works because it gives the action a different texture. It feels more controlled at first, more contained, but still vicious. You get that clash of technique and brutality, where the fight is not just about who can punch harder, but who can adapt faster. It gives the movie a chance to shift rhythm without slowing down. The ice scene is a bit more divisive. Some people will love the visual idea and the danger of the setting. Others might get pulled out by the effects or think it looks a little goofy in places. I can understand both reactions. But even when the scene is not perfect, it still has that furious attitude of trying to make every fight feel different. The movie does not want the action to blur together. It wants each set piece to have its own hook. And then, of course, there is the final showdown. This is the one people are going to remember. The climax is massive, exhausting, bloody, and almost absurdly committed. It feels less like a normal final fight and more like the movie throwing every remaining idea it has onto the screen. Different fighters, different styles, different weapons, shifting spaces, bodies hitting the ground, people getting back up when they absolutely should not. It just keeps going, and going, and going. For some viewers, that is going to be the peak of the whole experience. The kind of finale where you are sitting there almost laughing because the movie refuses to calm down. Every time you think it has reached its limit, it finds another layer. Another opponent, another impact, another cruel little twist in the choreography. For others, I can see it becoming too much. The final battle is long, very long. There is a point where you might think, okay, this has to be the ending, and then the film basically says, nope, we still have more bones to break. Depending on your mood, that is either amazing or exhausting. Maybe both, but even when it stretches itself, the craft is hard to deny. The finale feels like a full showcase for everything the movie does best. Brutal hand-to-hand combat, environmental weapons, clashing martial arts styles, clear camera movement, and performers who look like they are genuinely putting their bodies through hell. It is not just big because it is long. It is big because the movie keeps changing the rhythm inside the chaos. That is what saves it from becoming only noise. The best parts of the climax have shape. You can feel momentum shifting. You can feel fighters getting more desperate. You can feel the movie trying to top itself in real time. And even if a few minutes could have been trimmed, there is something kind of admirable about how completely it refuses to hold back. This is not a film that ends with a polite final punch and a neat little wrap-up. It ends like an action movie trying to empty the tank, and that is why the set pieces matter so much. They are not just interruptions in the story. They are the reason the movie exists. The first fight sets the tone. The hammer fight shows the creativity. The chase shows the madness. The MMA and ice sequences add variety. And the final showdown turns the whole thing into a full-blown martial arts endurance test. Is it too much? Maybe. But with the Furious, too much is kind of the point. What really separates The Furious from a lot of disposable action movies is that the action does not feel accidental. It feels engineered, not in a cold, mechanical way. More like every department understands the same mission. Make the fights hit as hard as possible, and make sure the audience can actually see them. That second part sounds basic, but in modern action, it is weirdly rare. Too many movies cut around movement, hide the impact, or shake the camera so much that the audience has to imagine the fight instead of watching it. The Furious does not have that problem. Kenji Tanagaki's direction has a real confidence when the movie is in motion. You can feel that he understands bodies, timing, and physical space. He is not just pointing a camera at stunt performers and hoping intensity appears. The scenes are built around movement, around rhythm, around letting one hit lead into the next, and letting the environment become part of the fight instead of just background decoration. That is why the camera work stands out so much. The camera is active, but it is not confused. It moves with the performers, circles around them, shifts angles, follows bodies across rooms, and still usually keeps the geography clear. You understand where people are. You understand who is attacking from which side. You understand when someone is cornered, when someone has space, and when the whole fight is about to collapse into chaos. That kind of clarity makes the brutality more effective. Because if you cannot see the hit, you cannot feel the hit. And The Furious wants you to feel every impact. The punches, kicks, falls, weapon strikes, body slams, they all land because the film is willing to show the work. It trusts the performers, it trusts the choreography, it trusts the audience to keep up. The editing mostly supports that too. For the action, the cuts feel designed to maintain flow rather than cover weakness. You are not getting chopped-up nonsense where every punch needs 5 angles. The fights have momentum, and the editing lets that momentum breathe. It stitches together complicated movement without draining the energy out of it. That is not easy, especially when the choreography is this packed with detail. Of course, the editing is not flawless. Some scenes do stretch. The movie has moments where the action keeps going past the point where a tighter cut might have made it hit even harder. And outside the fights, the pacing can feel less controlled. You can sometimes feel the film trying to get through its dramatic material so it can return to what it does best. But inside the action, that is where the craft really clicks. The sound design is another big part of it. The hits have weight, the bodies sound heavy, the weapons feel nasty. A hammer does not just look dangerous, it sounds dangerous. When someone crashes into a surface, the sound helps sell the pain. That is important in a movie this physical, because the audio has to match the violence on screen. Still, the sound is also where one of the film's biggest distractions shows up. The ADR and dubbing can be rough. Sometimes voices do not quite match faces. Sometimes the line delivery feels slightly detached from the scene, like the dialogue was added from another room after the fact. It is not always enough to ruin a moment, but it can pull you out, especially during quieter dramatic scenes where the movie already feels less natural. That is the strange split with The Furious. When it is using sound to sell impact, it works. When it is using sound to sell dialogue, it becomes shakier. The practical craft, though, deserves real credit. The makeup, the gore effects, the beat-up faces, the bruises, the blood, the physical damage, all of that adds texture to the violence. Even when the characters survive way more punishment than any normal human should, the movie still tries to make the damage visible. People look worn down. They look battered. They look like the fights are costing them something, at least in the moment. And that matters because this film could have easily felt weightless. With this much exaggerated violence, one bad choice could turn the whole thing into empty cartoon noise. But the practical details help ground it. Blood, sweat, broken expressions, messy injuries, bodies moving with exhaustion. Those touches keep reminding you that the performers are giving this everything they have. The score also does its job without taking over the movie. It supports the tone, pushes the action forward, and gives certain scenes that extra surge of genre energy. It is not necessarily the first thing you walk away talking about, but it helps the film maintain that gritty, aggressive rhythm. So, as a technical action package, The Furious is seriously impressive, not perfect. Not polished in every corner, the dubbing issues are real. Some editing choices could be tighter. Some sound choices feel a little artificial. But when the movie is doing what it was built to do, staging bodies in motion, capturing impact, letting choreography breathe, it is operating at a level most action films would love to reach. That is the craft behind the chaos. The fights look wild, but they are not random. The camera is moving, but it is not lost. The editing is energetic, but mostly readable. The sound is aggressive, but usually effective. And the practical work gives the violence a grimy, painful texture. Basically, The Furious works because the people making it understand a simple truth. Action is not just about movement. It is about how you show movement, how you cut it, how you hear it, and how much you make the audience believe that every hit actually matters. The Furious is violent in a way that does not really pretend to be tasteful. It is not just action movie violent, where people get punched, fall down neatly, and the camera moves on. This movie wants the impact to look ugly. It wants the hits to feel nasty. People are smashed, stabbed, slammed, crushed, thrown, beaten, and dragged through fights that go way past normal human limits. And honestly, that is part of the appeal. The violence has this raw, almost savage quality to it. You can feel the anger behind it. This is not a clean superhero fight where everyone looks perfectly posed between strikes. The fights in The Furious feel sweaty, desperate, and mean. When a hammer comes out, it feels like a terrible idea. When somebody crashes into the floor, you feel it. When a character gets back up after taking punishment, you're not always thinking, that makes sense. Sometimes you're thinking, there is absolutely no way this person is still alive. And that is where the movie becomes a little ridiculous. Characters in this film survive things that would end most fights immediately. Not just slow them down, end them. Broken bones, brutal head hits, car impacts, weapons, blood loss, repeated beatings, and yet people keep standing up, keep swinging, keep finding one more burst of energy like their bodies are running on pure revenge and broken physics. At some point, realism leaves the room. The question is whether that bothers you. For some viewers, it definitely will. The movie is so brutal that you expect consequences. If a scene is staged with this much blood and impact, then injuries should matter. A character should slow down. A wound should change the way they move. A hit that looks devastating should not just disappear 5 minutes later. And when that does happen, it can make the danger feel less real. That is the strange tension inside The Furious. The violence is presented with weight, but the characters have almost superhero-level durability. So the movie is asking you to feel the pain while also accepting that these fighters can absorb an absurd amount of damage. Sometimes that contrast is exciting. Sometimes it is distracting. It depends on how willing you are to meet the film on its own terms, because this is not a realistic crime thriller. Not really. It has a dark subject, a desperate father, and a violent criminal world, but the action belongs to a heightened universe. A world where rage can keep a man moving longer than logic would allow. A world where a fight can turn into a full-blown endurance trial. A world where someone should probably be unconscious, but instead they grab the nearest object and make the scene even worse for everyone else. And if you can accept that, the movie becomes much easier to enjoy. You stop judging every injury by real-world rules and start watching it like a brutal martial arts comic book brought to life. Not weightless exactly, but exaggerated. Bigger than real life. Meaner than real life. The kind of action where the body is treated less like a fragile human thing and more like a weapon that refuses to break until the movie is finished with it. That does not excuse every moment. There are definitely scenes where the lack of consequences undercuts the impact. If everyone can survive almost anything, then the tension can start to wobble. You still enjoy the choreography, but part of your brain is whispering, "Come on, that guy would be finished by now." And yes, sometimes he absolutely would be. But the Furious is so committed to its own insanity that the exaggeration becomes part of its personality. It is not asking for quiet realism. It is asking you to lock into the rhythm, accept the blood-soaked madness, and let the action hit you on a more instinctive level. The movie wants gasps, laughs of disbelief, winces, and that weird action fan reaction where something is so over the top that you cannot help but respect the nerve of it. That is why the brutality works more often than it does not. Because underneath all the impossible durability, the fights still have craft, the hits are staged well, the bodies move with purpose, the gore and damage give the scenes texture. Even when your logical brain knows this is absurd, your action movie brain is having too much fun to fully complain. So yes, The Furious is unrealistic, very unrealistic, but it is not lazy about it. It builds a world where pain matters in the moment, even if the long-term consequences are questionable. It gives you violence that is bloody, excessive, sometimes cartoonish, sometimes genuinely vicious, and almost always designed to make you react. And maybe that is the best way to watch it. Do not go in expecting realism. Go in expecting impact. Go in expecting people to keep fighting long after common sense has left the building. Go in expecting the kind of movie where broken bodies somehow find one more hit, one more weapon, one more reason to stand up. Because in The Furious, survival is not about medical logic. It is about whether the fight scene is done with you yet. The pacing in The Furious is a funny thing, because depending on who you ask, it is either one of the movie's biggest strengths or one of the things that wears you down by the end. And honestly, both reactions make sense. On one hand, this movie moves. It really moves. It does not spend forever setting up the world, explaining every relationship, or building some complicated web of crime movie politics. It gives you the premise, points Wang in the direction of the people responsible, and then the film basically starts throwing bodies into motion. For action fans, that is kind of refreshing. There is very little dead air here. Even when the movie slows down, it never feels like it has fully stopped. You can sense the next burst of violence waiting around the corner. The quiet scenes are more like brief moments to breathe before the next fight scene kicks the door open. In that sense, The Furious has a strong forward drive. It knows the audience came for action, and it does not make them wait too long to get it. But that much action creates its own problem. After a while, even great fight scenes can start to blur together if the movie does not give them enough contrast. And The Furious comes close to that line a few times. The choreography is incredible, the performers are giving everything, the camera is alive, but there are stretches where the film is pushing so hard, for so long, that you can start to feel the weight of it. Not boredom exactly. More like action fatigue. There is only so much punching, smashing, stabbing, slamming, and bone cracking a movie can throw at you before your brain starts asking for a little more shape between the chaos. The film does try to vary things with different settings, weapons, and fighting styles, and that helps a lot. But because the story is so thin, the action has to carry almost everything. So when a fight runs even slightly too long, you feel it. That is especially true near the climax. The final stretch is huge. It is wild, impressive, and packed with the kind of martial arts insanity that action fans dream about. But it is also long enough that you may find yourself thinking, okay, this is amazing, but are we still going? And then yes, the movie is still going. Another opponent, another phase, another brutal exchange, another round of punishment that should have ended 5 minutes ago. For some viewers, that is going to be the best part. For others, it might be where the movie crosses from thrilling into exhausting. I do not think the long runtime destroys the film, but I do think a tighter version may have hit even harder. Sometimes cutting a few minutes does not make a movie feel smaller, it makes the impact sharper. The Furious has so much action that trimming certain scenes could have made the whole thing feel more relentless in a cleaner way. Because relentless and repetitive are not the same thing. When the movie is at its best, it is relentless. Every fight escalates, every movement has purpose, every set piece finds a new idea. But when it stretches itself too far, it risks becoming repetitive, even if the individual moments are well made. That is the danger of building almost the entire movie around action. The action has to keep evolving, or the audience starts to feel the pattern. Thankfully, The Furious usually does find enough new tricks to keep itself alive. A different weapon, a different room, a different style, a different rhythm. That variety is what saves it from becoming just one long brawl. But still, there are moments where the movie feels like it could have trusted itself to stop a little earlier. Not every fight needs one extra phase. Not every ending needs another ending after it, and that is probably the most honest way to describe the pacing. It is exciting, but not always disciplined. The movie has incredible momentum, but it sometimes mistakes more for better. Most of the time, more actually is better here, because the craft is so strong. But by the end, you may feel like you have been through a full physical workout just sitting in the chair. Maybe that is part of the experience. The Furious does not want to be smooth and balanced. It wants to overwhelm you. It wants you leaving the theater slightly stunned, maybe laughing, maybe tired, maybe wondering how many stunt performers needed ice packs after filming. It is not a clean, perfectly measured action film. It is a movie that keeps swinging until somebody forces it to stop, and I kind of respect that. Even when it goes too long, at least it goes too long because it has too much energy, too many ideas, too much physical madness spilling out of it. There are worse problems for an action movie to have. So yes, The Furious could be tighter. Some scenes could be trimmed. The finale could probably lose a few minutes and still be incredible. The non-stop action may be too much for viewers who need more story, more quiet, or more emotional breathing room. But if you are the kind of viewer who wants action cinema to leave you bruised by the time the credits roll, then the overload is not just a flaw. It is part of the thrill. The easiest way to sell The Furious is also the laziest way to sell it. You say, it is like Taken mixed with The Raid, and most action fans immediately understand the general shape of the thing. A father trying to rescue his daughter, a criminal underworld, a whole army of people about to regret showing up to work that day. Then you add the physical intensity, the brutal martial arts, the non-stop escalation, and yeah, the comparison basically writes itself. But the movie is a little more interesting than just that. Because The Furious feels like it is pulling from a whole shelf of action history. You can feel echoes of The Raid, obviously, not just because of the cast connections, but because of the way the fights are staged as survival tests. Rooms become war zones, bodies crash into bodies. Every opponent feels like another wall the heroes have to break through. Then there is that John Wick feeling, not in the gun-fu sense, but in the way people talk about it after watching. That you have to see this scene, energy. That sense that the movie is trying to raise the ceiling for what modern action can look like. You can argue about whether it fully reaches those heights, but it is absolutely playing in that conversation. And then you get the older DNA, old Hong Kong action, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, the kind of martial arts cinema where movement is the main attraction and the story is there to give the fighting a pulse. There are moments where The Furious feels like a throwback to those wild, bruising kung fu movies that did not care much about being subtle. Bad guys are bad, heroes are pushed too far, and the audience is there to watch skill, pain, and chaos collide. There are even flashes that make you think of Old Boy, especially when the movie starts turning tools and cramped spaces into punishment. And when things get larger than life, almost game-like, you can understand why someone might connect it to something like the Yakuza games. It has that same exaggerated street brawl madness, where realism is not the point. Style, impact, and escalation are the point. That is where the cult appeal comes in. The Furious feels like the kind of movie that action fans will pass around, not necessarily because it is flawless, but because it has scenes people will want to show each other. The hammer fight, the final showdown. The moments where somebody uses an object in a way that makes the whole theater react. This is not just a watch it once and forget it action film. It has that discovery movie quality. The kind where one person sees it, tells 3 friends, and suddenly everyone is arguing about where it ranks next to The Raid or John Wick, Chapter 4. Now, do I think it is for everybody? No, absolutely not. If you need a layered plot, careful character development, realistic injuries, and polished dramatic dialogue, this movie is probably going to frustrate you. If you are sensitive to gore, same thing. The Furious is not gentle. It is bloody, loud, sometimes awkward, and very happy to choose another fight scene over a deeper conversation. But for martial arts fans, that trade-off is probably going to be worth it. This is the kind of movie that benefits from being watched big, loud, and preferably with other people who are ready to react. A crowd helps. You want that shared disbelief when a fight keeps escalating. You want the laughs, the gasps, the little murmurs when the choreography does something nasty. Watching it at home will still work, sure, but the theatrical experience gives the madness extra electricity. That said, casual viewers might be better off streaming it later, not because the film is weak, but because it is so specifically built for people who love this kind of action. If you are only mildly interested, the thin story and long fights may start to feel like too much. But if you are the kind of viewer who rewatches fight scenes on YouTube, studies choreography, or still talks about the hallway fight in Oldboy and the apartment chaos in The Raid, then this is not optional. You should see it. Maybe it is not the cleanest action movie. Maybe it borrows from a lot of places. Maybe some of the hype is a little overheated. But honestly, I would rather watch a movie that swings too hard than one that plays everything safe. And The Furious swings like it has something to prove. It has flaws, but it also has that rare action movie spark, the feeling that the people making it were not just filling a genre slot, they were chasing impact. They were trying to make audiences sit up, react, and remember why physical action cinema still matters. So my recommendation is simple. If you love martial arts movies, go find The Furious. Watch it with the biggest screen and loudest sound you can get. Bring friends who can handle the violence. Do not go in expecting realism or deep crime drama. Go in expecting bodies, rhythm, brutality, and a film that keeps pushing until it nearly exhausts itself. For the right audience, this is not just another action movie. It is the kind of movie you walk out of already wanting to talk about.